they're cannibalized if they're there for a while in the lucrative parts market, but they're still airworthy airplanes that are ready to go. They're just in between leases. So I took a little trip out there, and I can tell you they got some big rattlesnakes.
Oh yeah,
on the south end of that airport. But at any rate, I did a little investigating of my own out there, and I looked around. One day, I went out there and I saw that there was 5 747s. This is a county-owned airport, and they wouldn't let me on the airport. They had Evergreen International is one of the famous spook contractors, but they were holding. They wouldn't let me pass the guard gate, and I just act like I was an aviation enthusiast, just wanted to take pictures or whatever. So I talked to a couple of people around the airport that live around the airport, and they were telling me, that many times people are trying to take pictures of that airport, and they'll send a car out there and confiscate the camera and all kinds of bad activities like that. But when I was out there, what I saw was, like I said, this was in about 06, 07, and there was 747s cargo that were being loaded up, and I have no idea where they were going. There was all types of Black Hawk helicopters flying around. It looked like LaGuardia Airport. There was so much traffic out there in the middle of the desert. The 757s and 767s were parked there. We have pictures of them. That's on our. I think that's on our Facebook. We have a bunch of videos on the Facebook that I think are really good. The Big Bamboozle is the page on that. So, there's no question, and there's quite a good history. If you go online, you can see. If you Google it, you can see. Look up the Pinal, Pinal Air Park. That's it's well known as a long-time CIA operated airport. There's a lot of controversy about trying to shut it down years ago. People that are on the board of directors are CIA people. So it has a long connection all the way back to, like I said, Air America.
All right, then. This is such a convoluted deal, isn't it? It's just so ridiculous. So let me just fire the proverbial shotgun out the back door. Why was this done? Who financed it? And who's the king rat who orchestrated all of this? I never thought it was a very good idea to have the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency become president. And it appears that the intelligence community is morphing into one great big American-style KGB. But that's just me, and probably a few million other people. So, you think Bush and Cheney were involved in this up to their necks? And I'll go out on the clothesline first, Philip, and I'll just tell you that I thought it was odd. I can tell you that if I were president of the United States and I got a message that something just hit the fan so hard that it busted off all the blades and stripped the spindle out of the fan motor, I'd have said, children, I have to go. I have to go back to work. A little something's come up, and I need to go. But we'll get back to the pet goat. I'll come back and see you, but I need to go right now. And I'd have been out the door. But again, that's just me. And as his presidency went on, I can't believe somebody just said, we're coming up on an election year, and all you're doing is bashing Bush. You left-wing moron. It's like that's the first time I've ever been accused of being a leftist. But anyway, hey, I'm glad that it's good if you're going to get anything thrown at you, it's good to get it from both sides. You know what I mean? That way you're going straight down the middle. But I thought his behavior became increasingly more odd. I found that as time went on, he was less articulate. The answers were more convoluted, and the facts became more obscured. So there, I've said my piece. You say yours.
Well, when we put the timing on the attack together, and we see who knew what and when they knew it, basically the FAA knew about 35 minutes before the airplane hit the North Tower. American 11 came out of Boston. The FAA was following these guys. All of a sudden the transponder went off, and this thing makes a beeline towards Manhattan. So there was teleconferences going on, between Boston and New York, FAA headquarters. They were well aware that this airplane had been hijacked. And on top of that, Muhammad Atta, who was flying American 11, thought he was talking to the passengers at one point. And he was actually talking to ATC, which Air Traffic Control, and everything's recorded.
Right.
And he basically said, everybody don't make any stupid moves and things like that.
Right.
So the controllers that were working that flight knew right away that this thing was a hijack, and they started calling people left and right. So when I put it together, when I put the times together, when all these calls were made, Condoleezza Rice, who's Steve Pesesnik, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a real interesting insider with the State Department. He said that it was a false flag operation, that Condoleezza Rice was part of it. So what I kind of concur with, I do concur with that, because when she supposedly, she had a telephone conversation with Bush at 8:55 after the American 11 had hit the North Tower. And in that conversation, she was talking to him and said, all we know is that it was a twin-engine airplane that crashed into the North Tower. Now, the only way she would have known that, and technically that's true, but if you say, it's a twin-engine airplane, you're thinking, a smaller, lighter plane type thing. 767 is a twin-engine airplane, but it weighs 300,000 pounds.
Yeah.
So for her to know that it was a twin-engine airplane, the only way she would have known that was because the FAA told her that, unless she had a eyewitness that just happened to be in, downtown Manhattan and say, you look like a twin-engine airplane to me. It makes no sense. So she told him. She tested. Finally, they got her They got her to testify in 2004. Of course, the media had already convicted, the ghost. And but at any rate, if you think about it, the only way she would have known it was a twin-engine airplane was from the FAA, and the only reason they were talking about that airplane was because they knew it was a hijack. So again, there's a just pants down type thing. There's no way she could have known that. So for him to sit, and that's before he went into the classroom. Now, he sat there until 9:02, fidgeting, looking around, and, he looked like a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs,
Yes, he did.
And, and then when the second one hit, I think what he needed to hear was that the attack was complete, and all he heard was that two had hit. So he had to stall. He had to wait. He had to, they must have been nervous. Whoever was behind this must have been sweating bullets at this point, because two of them had hit, and two of them were missing at that point, and probably they didn't know where the other two were. So that, to me, tells me that, there's something stinky about it. And, well, and before, too, with the 23 supposed PDBs that were sent up to the president, and he didn't take any action. He didn't alert airline pilots. He didn't alert anyone. It just stinks. And no one, I don't think anyone's ever, I think there was one reporter that asked him, hey, were you behind this?
Right.
And no one's ever asked him that directly, except for that time. And he just looked like a deer caught in the headlights when they asked him that question. It's online. I've seen it a few times, but it's almost funny the way he didn't know what to say. but he
well, who financed this? What are the indications from your research?
Well, again, the Congressional Joint Inquiry followed the financing that went to the hijackers. There was a Riggs Bank account in Washington, D.C., that Prince Bandar bin Sultan, the good friend of, they call him Bandar Bush, he's so tight with the Bush family, he opened an account, and his wife had an account, and the Congressional Inquiry said there was, unlimited funding from Saudi Arabia. The guy that met him in Los Angeles, a couple of days after the hijackers arrived, had seemingly unlimited financing from Saudi Arabia. That's a quote from their report.
Unlimited financing.
Unlimited. Seemingly unlimited financing from Saudi Arabia.
What's in it for the Saudis to cause this to be a part of this of a problem of this magnitude? I mean, we know that some people made some money shorting some airline stocks. I mean, there were some curious dealings on Wall Street prior to this attack, but I can't. And the Saudis are so enigmatic. Most of the population lives in squalor, and then there's the select few that does well. But I don't. Were they under? I mean, what's in it for the Saudis for us to go to war with Iraq to the point where they would provide unlimited financing for this attack?
Yeah, there's a thread. There's definitely a thread in all of this stuff that makes its way to Saudi Arabia. And like I said before 9/11, I was studying this relationship between the Bush family and the Saudi government, and they were definitely involved in the BCCI scandal. They were definitely involved in the other covert operation, from the Reagan-Bush administration, which was the Iran-Contra financing. So there's an alliance there somewhere, and it's power. It's definitely something to do with a lot of power. If you've got control of the oil markets, and it just falls into that area. I can't tell you exactly why they were, but it's very obvious that they were involved in this one, and they were involved in the other two that I mentioned earlier. So it's power. It's power. Absolute power is what they have over there, and absolute power is what the intelligence community is working on right now, and they're trying to. Well, they pretty much outpowered our congressional or our judicial branch and the executive branch. We've had the president, Obama, has stated many times that he wants to prosecute this Khalid Sheikh Mohammed that's down there in Guantanamo. And right next to him was the Attorney General. So there you have two of the three branches right there that want to prosecute him. But for some reason, and they announced that they were going to have the trial in New York a couple of years ago, and I've been watching it really close, and I still can't tell you how that got derailed. But it's an absolute power type thing.
Closing Guantanamo Bay and dragging all those people into civilian court might not be the best idea, you think?
Why not?
Well, because they might sing about who's actually behind this.
Oh, absolutely. You're a pilot. You understand situational awareness. You have to realize how you got into a situation to figure your way out of it.
Yes.
And basically, if we use the judicial system, like Obama promised in his campaign in 2004, or was it 2008?
8, yeah. Time goes by quickly.
Yeah.
Even when you're not having fun.
Yeah, I mean, because I realized in 2005 that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had, I mean, this guy, give me a break. This guy has nothing. He has no aviation expertise. You know, you're trying to tell us that this guy is the one that found holes in the U.S. military air defenses? You know, that would really be embarrassing to some of these Air Force generals that, you know, have gone to military school all these years. You know, that this guy figured out, oh, this is how we can penetrate the U.S. air defenses. It's impossible. It's a big bamboozle. So, you know, if this guy came to trial, the lid would be blown off of this thing, and it would change Washington. And I think that if you brought this guy, you would see a lot of corporate jets flying nonstop to Argentina.
I think you're right about that, and I'm getting the sense that we're coming up to the top of the hour, and we'll get into a bunch more stuff here. But it's becoming clearer all the time that it really seems to make very little difference who's in office, except who's sitting in office when the plan is initiated. But the ship keeps going in the same direction. We'll be back with Captain Philip Marshall on Coast to Coast AM. Yes, come without a warning like a UFO. That's us, the mothership that is Coast to Coast AM. We will be back with Philip Marshall after a brief break, and let's ask some more interesting questions because he has some very interesting answers. You can send a question to me. I will. I'll try and get it on the air if it's good. That's John B. at Coast to Coast AM, JOHN, B as in Bravo, at coasttocoastam.com. I'm reading them now, and we'll be back with Philip Marshall in just a minute. This is Coast. Philip Marshall, how were these pilots able to have so much time without running into some fighters? What was up with that?
Well, like I said, if the attack would have been executed the way I believe it was drawn up, where these guys would take off in the first 15 minutes, got to altitude, and then just shot right to their targets. It was a good tactical plan. Now, like I said, 2 of them hit on plan. The other 2 delayed for almost another hour. It's very interesting that there was a competent response from the military at first. They launched 2 F-15s out of Otis Air Force Base out in Cape Cod. But they wouldn't have made it there. They didn't make it in time. So I think it's really suspicious that when the attack started to encounter delays, that all of a sudden there was seemed like a military stand down until it got completed. And when we go back and look at what Dick Cheney was running the response from the White House, it becomes very apparent that what he told the country there was a Meet the Press on that next Sunday, and he said that they launched more fighters and that they ordered a shoot down. But when we checked that, and more specifically when Jeremy Scahill checked that, and Philip Sheenan, who wrote the commission, there were 7 logs that's taken on those conversations between Cheney and Bush, and none of them mention a shoot down order or even a scramble. So I thought this guy Steve Posednik that came out after the Bin Laden that crazy raid that they supposedly killed him. He came out and said that he used to teach that at military school, that a stand down. So it seems to me there was a very obvious stand down. And then as soon as they got the word that United 93 crashed, and that was the fourth one, then they launched some fighters. But when they got over there, nothing was, only smoke was in the sky at that point. Everything else was done. So it's really very suspicious that for that hour, we couldn't get one fighter airborne.
Wow. It's unbelievable. I got another question that's been dogging me and a lot of other people for a long time, and that's the absence of debris at the Pentagon. I mean, I'm sure you've heard all these theories on it actually having been hit by a missile rather than an aircraft. Do you subscribe to any of these theories, or are you convinced it was an aircraft? And if so, how come so little debris?
Well, there was, when you look at the pictures, there's a fairing, there's some pieces out in front of the Pentagon right after the crash. There's a wing fairing that's out there laying in front. But this thing hit at 482 knots indicated, which is about 530 miles per hour. So, and I've heard people say, well, the hole's not big enough. Well, you had a fortified west wing of the Pentagon, and the wings are pretty light. I mean, you're talking about aluminum wings, so they didn't withstand a hit on the west wall. So I've talked to controllers at Washington National. They saw the airplane. They got a visual on it. I've talked to the lead investigator at FAA, and I think it's overwhelmed. I don't think there's any question. I think that was probably part of the psych ops that was floating bad information about that. But people thought it was a missile because the airplane was flying so fast. Normally, if you're in Washington, you'll see airplanes going down the Potomac, and they're slowed down to like 140 knots. This airplane was doing, 4 times that speed. So it probably looked like a missile. It probably sounded like a missile. And it was a missile. It was a 757 missile. But I don't think there's any question. The radar shows it. The black boxes show it. So I think that was probably something to distract us. I think it was propaganda.
Some of us just don't know when to stop. I certainly don't. Perhaps someone will have to do that for me. But this whole bloody thing, quite literally, I don't know how to get my mind around this. Do I believe that my government would turn on the people like that? I don't want to think so, but do I think that 3,000 people in the World Trade Center buildings could be sacrificed toward the further goal of locking the whole thing down under some sort of an ever-encroaching police state? Yes, I do. Soldiers and civilians have been sacrificed before. As a matter of fact, when the Allies captured the Enigma decoding machine back in World War II, they had to, I think it was it Coventry that got hit so badly? It was a terrible, thousands of people were lost, but if we had done anything to thwart that attack, it would have tipped off the Germans that we had their machine. So we just let it go. Do you sense that there is an encroaching police state and that this is just one in a series of false flag attacks that are designed to bring about a totalitarian regime, at least in contrast to what we've grown up with or what we thought we had? Or do you even want to go there? Because if you don't, I understand.
You know, I have my opinions about that, but to tell you the truth, I am not an expert in that area. My message really is that this was a Saudi operation that was probably covered by our Special Activities Division, and but when you put it together and you see who is given this fable about bin Laden and all that, those are the same people who are developing the DHS and the TSA. You know, supposedly some guy in a cave attacked us, but Grandma going through security at Des Moines Airport is being, she's getting shaken down, and it's just really, it's troubling to see, this systematic takeover of the government, and these guys are, I don't know what the big picture is. I don't know what they saw down the road that may have been a bigger number, that may have been leading to something bigger that they stopped. I don't know why this attack led us to go invade Iraq, other than it was written in I don't know if you're familiar with the Project for a New American Century, but that's one of my pieces of evidence that's on our website, and it's on our evidence sources. That plan that they came up with, it was a theoretical attack that they called it a new Pearl Harbor, and that would help America get into a war mentality. And it just seems that plan, if you look at it now, 11 years later, is the same thing that's happened. It's actually transpired exactly like that. They talk about using Predator drones and, Blackwater type mercenary armies, but it's so encompassing now, because what it's done is given this great authority, this fear of an enemy that I don't really think is there. And it's given them a lot of power and a lot of, there's a lot of hysteria involved when you go to the airport now. They're telling you, look at your neighbor, look around, see who looks suspicious. We got everybody looking at each other, and now they're looking into our lives, and everything's being coordinated with DHS, and the DMV now out here. It's very suspicious that it's the very same people that are telling us that it was a terrorist attack. They're the same people that are clamping down, and really their power has gone up so much. So I think that it's a big plan. It's when you read that Project for a New American Century, they talk about Dick Cheney as being their leader, their inspirational leader, and those types are now the ones that are really in control of what's going on. So they don't really need to have an election anymore if they have power over our three branches of government.
Well, it looks like it really does look like it's morphing into one big KGB. It really does look that way. In fact, I saw a silver gray Ford, police car looking thing, like the one, like the one the feds drive around. Everybody drives in that business, and it had an interesting, very official, federal looking seal on the door. and it said, Veterans Securing America. And there were a couple of young guys there, so they were coming out of this gas station. I spoke with them for a minute and said, say, fellas, never seen that. I've never seen a plaque like that. What department are you with? Are you Homeland Security? No, they're just basically what they are is they're young veterans that just finished up with a couple of tours. One of them had been in for 5 years, another one for double. And they had been to the Middle East twice. And now they were just securing whatever federal facilities they were asked to secure. So they weren't really very specific, but I got these were fit, fresh soldiers. And now they got themselves a federal job, and I'm like, is there just no end? Maybe I just don't get around much, but I never saw a veteran securing America before on the side of any federal-looking car. And I'm starting to see Federal Protective Services, Department of Homeland Security, the big suburban-looking machines with increasing frequency. I spoke with one of them, and he said, oh, no, we're basically security guards for federal properties. Could be anything. But there just seems to be no end to it. And I understand, going back to that drone thing, I understand that in the next few years we're going to have 30,000 of them, and there have been over 200 applications for to fly these things just in the last year. So I don't really know where it's all headed. I'm not sure I want to know, but I feel like I need to know, and I feel like the American people need to know. And I don't want to turn this into a scare fest or anything, but this is getting just a little bit freaky. I mean, the Russians were over there for 9 years, and then we go over there for 9 years. And it's no parade. St. Louis did it. New York turned it down. And now we're gearing up for Iran. And, could this just be, could the simple fact of the matter be that we've been on a wartime economy ever since World War II, and without a war, we don't have an economy? I mean, is that even possible?
Yeah, I don't know. The DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, there's a building going up in Washington right now that's been estimated at $3.2 billion. And they are, there was a great series in the Washington Post last year. Dana Priest and William Arkin are two journalists that work for the Post, and they had a 4-part series called Top Secret America, where they went into how the DHS is now hooking into all the counties and around, and they have these devices, that they can put on the side of the road where it can read license plates and tell you how much money you have in your bank account, basically, every time you go past them. They automatically can read your license plate and get all your information. The satellite systems that are circling the globe right now are all hooked into this, the GPSs. And, you really don't have any security when you have so many people that have access to your personal whereabouts. If it was if we were if there were so many bad guys out there, maybe they're anticipating some kind of a financial meltdown or something. I don't know. I'm from New Orleans originally, and it was really frightening to hear about the Blackwater guys that were on the ground in New Orleans, after Katrina. There's definitely a movement going on. It seems like they're preparing for something. And, I can't tell you what that is. I have no idea what that's going to be, but they're definitely hooking into the counties, local police departments. It's going to be one, big federal eye watching us when, I think we should be watching them.
Do you think it's, do you get the sense that it's too big, too screwed up, and too far down the road to stop it, or do you believe that it can be stopped? And more to the point, I mean, I'm just throwing questions out here because it's like this is just beyond anything that I thought was even possible. But I mean, have we just drunk so much fluoride and chlorine and just watched so much stuff we shouldn't be watching on the internet and so forth that we've just been asleep at the switch the whole time, and now, we finally come out of the fog and it's like, oh wow, who are you guys? Gee, they're all wearing the same uniforms. What happened? Do you think is there any way to correct this, or are we just going to have to ride it out all the way to the bottom?
No, I think what really amazes me is that there's so many people who have come forward. Senator Bob Graham, who was the chairman of the first federal investigation, has written 2 books with the message that 9/11 was a Saudi operation. Thomas Keene, the head of the 9/11 Commission, and his co-chair, Lee Hamilton, they wrote a book, that said that there was a big cover-up and an obstruction of justice, especially when they were trying to interrogate Khalid Sheikh Mohammed down there. The 9/11 Commission's general counsel, John Farmer, wrote a book, that said that everything that was told to the commission by the Bush administration was inexplicably and almost entirely untrue. Steve Posednik, the guy that worked in the State Department, real insider there, he said that there's a general...
Thanks, Ross Mitchell. Appreciate you. Well, if you would like to speak with Philip Marshall, I have a question or two. You're welcome to call those numbers that Ross just gave you. You are also invited to send an email to me at johnb as in Bravo, at coasttocoastam.com. And we will come back for the final hour of tonight's program right after this little 2-minute break. So stand by. This is Coast to Coast AM. Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, great googly moogly. Could I just mention something to you? And that is, I feel strongly about this. I have not been instructed to do this. I'm doing it of my own volition, even though, it's been suggested off and on. But, I mean, there's nothing that says, here, read this now. I'm not reading anything. In fact, I'm sort of making things up on the fly. Notes do not help me because I can't read my writing. But do consider becoming a Coast Insider. And this is all that I'll say about it. It's inexpensive. You will enjoy it. You have 3 years of archive programs to listen to, and there isn't any interference, if you catch my meaning. We are back now with Philip Marshall, and we'll take a few of your calls a little bit later in the hour. Well, let's see. Where were we? We were all over the place, and so let's come back. Let's talk about about the man who I personally feel. Now, Susan Lindauer earlier felt like Bin Laden was killed in Tora Bora, and there was no mention of a dialysis machine sitting around on the SEAL raid that took him out. I just wonder if we know he was the leader of the Mujahideen when the Afghanis were fighting the Russians. So I'm just wondering if he got a nice check, dyed his hair blonde, got a trim, a nice suit, and is now retired. So who conducted the raid that supposedly captured Osama bin Laden? And why didn't the American media raise more questions about that raid if he's supposed to be the great perpetrator? Seems like he would have had a lot to say about the whole apparatus. But then again, some people have come to the conclusion that there is no Al-Qaeda. That's the boogeyman. It doesn't really exist. Do you have some thoughts on this?
Well, I think that raid was very questionable on a lot of levels. First of all, I don't think that any American soldier would take an order to shoot an unarmed man in front of his family or whatever. I thought that would be a great opportunity for us to demonstrate to the world our justice system. And all of these videotapes that have come up over the years, they don't add up. They don't. His appearance changed. There's one in particular that that we have posted, where he's walking with a supposedly militiamen. It's a BBC piece that we repeated on the Facebook page, and it's very interesting. He's supposed to be 6'7", real tall guy, but in this picture, it's the same guy that was doing the videos. And unless everyone in that militia group is 6'7", this guy, it doesn't add up. It just doesn't add up. And no one has seen him. The president of Pakistan said many years ago that he was dead. His obituary was published in Egyptian papers and Pakistani papers back in 2001. So it looked like he died. And according to Steve Posesnik, said that, he had Marfan syndrome, which is, fatal. You don't live through that one. Way back in 2000 when he saw him in a hospital in Dubai. If you're on a dialysis machine, like he was reported back in 2000, you need sterile water, you need electricity. It's just no one saw the guy. No one saw him really for 10 years. And even after these videos came out, when you listen to, Bush administration officials, they say, well, we haven't heard from this guy in quite some time. Well, supposedly he just made a video the month before that, and they're saying that. So that doesn't add up. So no one's seen this guy for 10 years. And then all of a sudden we get this announcement, oh, yeah, we went in there, we found him, we killed him, and we threw him in the sea. Believe us. Yeah. And then, well, we can't show you the pictures because it's just too gruesome to show you these pictures. But if you're watching this carefully, like, I've really been paying attention to that raid because, in my first book, or the first one about 9/11, False Flag 9/11, we came to the conclusion that he had died in December of 2001. And a lot of people have echoed that belief. So if you're conducting a reconnaissance on that compound, like they said, for 2 months prior to this supposed raid, where's the reconnaissance photos? Why didn't they take? We could bear to see that, couldn't we? If you have a picture of him, supposedly there was a lot of propaganda that was sent out, that he was called the pacer, that he would go out in the compound and walk and just pace back and forth. Where's the pictures? We could stomach that, couldn't we?
You would think so. As far as bin Laden's concerned, the last photograph I saw of him, he looked 90. Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, he looked decrepit. It didn't really even look like him. It looked like somebody who was sort of dressed up like him, almost like an Elvis impersonator.
Yeah, well, look on the Facebook page, the Big Bamboozle Facebook page that we have. We have a BBC, another piece of the BBC where they actually went in there and started asking citizens of that town, what they thought of it. And they were just laughing and saying, the guy that they showed was Abraham or somebody that they knew, and it wasn't bin Laden, and none of his neighbors had seen him for the whole time. There's not one picture of the guy. There's not, except for that one that, supposedly he's sitting there watching himself on TV. There's no voice recordings of him. There's no record at all of him. And so we found him last night, and we took care of him. We threw him in the sea. Believe us, and we'll make the announcement, and just believe us. And but it's the same group. The same group that did this raid is the same group that captured Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in Pakistan. The same group that brought him to Guantanamo. The same group that through third-hand testimony, he confessed, supposedly. That same thread of this little special activities group. we're supposed to just believe whatever they tell us with no backup. And like I said, I think the biggest thing would be, where's the reconnaissance photos? If he's out there pacing all these hours in the backyard, where are those pictures?
Well, look, here's the thing. I've reached a point where I don't know what to say and what not to say. So I think I'll just go ahead and just let out whatever comes out. And here's the thing. It's a question. Have we just become a nation of idiots? I mean, have we? I'm serious, and I lump myself in that group as well. I'm speaking to friends, Americans, a few enemies, whatever. Left, right, center, don't care, political, apolitical, just Americans, just people who live from the Rio Grande and the Gulf to the Canadian border, to the Pacific, to the Atlantic, just the Americans here. Have we just become such a bunch of idiots that we're going to continue to just be fed this ineffable twaddle and just go, oh, well, okay, there are elected representatives. I guess they're telling the truth. It's like they're not telling the truth. And I can only say that this is a night filled with technological anomaly, which is one of the reasons that I suggested that you become an insider, because you'll get the unexpurgated version of the program, because there are questions that have been asked, and they've been asked, and they've been asked, and people dodge in the political theater. They dodge them, and it seems to make no difference who is in office. President Obama said, "I'm going to close Guantanamo Bay," and that didn't happen. We're going to pull our troops out of Iraq. Well, that was almost a non-event, and God bless each and every one of our servicemen and women for giving it everything that you have, and in some cases everything you've ever had, everything you have, and everything you're ever gonna have, because some of these people lost their lives. I know what it's like to have family, and I know how I would feel. My father told me some time ago, he goes, you didn't know this? You might have been carrying a 1A draft card, but you were not going to Vietnam. I said, really? He goes, that's correct. You were not going. I said, really, Dad? And how were you planning on doing that? He goes, well, that's my business, but it's just as well they didn't call you up because you were not going. And I said, well, why not? I would have wanted to go. He goes, not for that, you wouldn't. And our veterans were treated badly. They're still being treated badly. I understand they're even yanking them around on their money now, and these people just go right on down the road. Let me get off of this for a second. Talk to us for a minute about the funny money moves that were made prior to the 9/11 attacks, because I want to reinforce this, and this is my position on this. With whatever tools that I am granted, with whatever privilege I have to sit behind this microphone and speak into it, I'm not just going to forget about 9/11. I'm not going to forget about any of it. I don't want any of you to forget about it either. Now, I don't have a big magic wand I can wave around and just instantly produce truth like the blue genie coming up out of the lamp. But it's like, I'm not letting this go. And I think that there are millions of Americans who aren't letting it go either. But they really have no direction, because it seems to make no difference whether it's what political party is in office. The ship keeps going in the same direction, and I've been beating that horse until it's dead. If I keep beating it some more, no animals were harmed in the broadcast, but it's a figurative thing. It's turning into glue. The horse is dead. It's beating a dead horse. It's glue, and we still get no answers. So let's talk about the money. What do you know about any of the stocks that were shorted, any of the put options, any of the money that went uncollected? I understand there's several $1 million sitting in a bank account that still hadn't been withdrawn. Can you enlighten us on this particular facet?
Well, we know, and I cited a lot of experts in the book, about how there was alarm bells going off on September 10th, and all these trades that were executed in the week prior to the attack. And then your last guest, Susan Lindauer, she said that, through a back channel in the CIA, that there was a rumor that this attack was going down. There's a chapter in the Big Bamboozle that talks about the setup, all these fake reports that said that this guy Bin Laden. My favorite title of those was that it's real. That Osama bin Laden is real. There were a lot of people that knew this thing was coming down in a certain circle, and I'm positive that Fox News Corporation, they knew it was coming down. They were ready with all these crazy stories, and to a rush to judgment happened so fast. Oh, this is the guy because we have all these reports. And those reports started to surface at the same time that the Saudis were getting ready to attack. When their flight training was ending completion, all these reports started coming up. So while they were getting ready on one side, the other side, the psychops, they were preparing this ghost that came, out of nowhere and defeated the entire United States military and all of our national security measures. So there were a lot of people that knew this was coming down. And, we can talk about this all night. We can talk about it for the next 10 years.
Yep.
But the answer is very simple. And it's our founding fathers anticipated that someone was going to try to take over our government, that they were going to try to get an absolute power going. And they left us with the tools that are still here to be a democracy, and all we have to do is use it. And it's very simple. Get it into the court system. If you get it into the court system, and you can start with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, bring it in there, now you open it up, and then we can go in and find all these experts that said, okay, there was a stock trade here. Where did that money go? Why didn't we track that down? All those trades could be tracked down. But if you have a Justice Department that's under the intelligence community, they're pretty much handcuffed. They're not going to do anything about it. So it's back to us. If we want a democracy, if we want to live by the Constitution, it's our duty. It's our duty, and the voices are starting to come forward now, and there's a lot of them. There's so many great witnesses that are available for a trial right now. It would be very entertaining to see this come down, but really, that was covered by the Founding Fathers. They anticipated this type of a takeover, and they gave us tools to fight it, and they're still there, and all we have to do is demand it.
I was told many years ago, in fact, my dad told me that people that he knew, this is a long time ago, said that the presidential candidates that when one of them makes it, becomes president, some people approach him and they have a little conversation. And at the end of that conversation, the newly elected president is never the same. So for anybody who has the idea that this is some sort of a Bush-bashing exercise, I am not convinced in any way, shape, or form that the one that sits in the Oval Office is the ultimate authority. I've never thought that, and I think less that way all the time. There are several levels to leadership. There's the one we see. Let me use this analogy. Let's use the analogy of the individual. It is said that a person is actually three people. You're who other people think you are, you're who you think you are, and you are who you really are. And I suppose this entire exercise is to just keep this alive. We cannot let this go. We have to have the truth, no matter how bitter a pill it is to swallow, no matter how unpleasant it is, And what sort of a statement would it make to the world that we have rescued from disaster on a number of occasions before we became what appears to be a nation of war makers? This is my personal opinion, and that's it. Does not necessarily represent the views of anybody that has anything to do with this organization, Premier Radio Networks, or any of the affiliate stations. Well, what sort of a statement would it make to the world if we were to say, these people are guilty, and we have brought them to justice? They have some explaining to do, and I don't really care which party they belong to. I may like them personally, but I have a real problem with some of their actions on both sides of the aisle. We'll be back with Philip Marshall on Coast to Coast AM. We're going to come back here in just a couple of minutes with some of your telephone calls. They're all lit up and the emails are coming in, and there are many, many questions that we would like to, you and me, would like to ask Philip Marshall. He has, he's written a book, The Big Bamboozle, and I'll tell you what, it's difficult. You're going to have to read this thing, because I'm telling you, it's the whole 9/11 thing, which must be kept alive until we find out exactly what. Unless you're prepared to accept the official MSM propaganda explanation of what happened. Oh, I'm sure we're far too stupid, unenlightened, and unintelligent to ever know the true meaning of those events. But we're seeing the meaning of the events, aren't we? And in the end, we may have to make a decision. Die on our feet or live on our knees. Think it over. We'll be back with Philip Marshall on Coast to Coast AM. Captain Philip Marshall, gee, it seems like it's been a long time since we were talking. but we're back now. Say, is it just sophomore to go into? We were talking a while ago about, there was a mention of some Fox News stuff, News Corp, so forth. The American media hasn't paid much attention to very much of this. And as I've mentioned on the program several times, there is no lawyer or public relations officer sitting next to me going, no, don't do that. Let me see your questions. Let me see your responses. No, you can't say that. So I'm afraid, for better or worse, I'm responsible for everything that comes out of my mouth. And if you don't hear me on the air again, well, I guess you'll know why. But is the news media just bought and paid for, so to speak, by the government-controlled propaganda engine now? Say only this, don't say that, do not raise this, no, that's too controversial, hey, shut up, don't you say, you're fired. They just took Judge Napolitano and his Freedom Watch off Fox News. You see the writing on the wall here? I do.
Yeah, well, I think they kind of set the pace at the beginning when, remember when Dan Rather, came up with about the National Guard issue with Bush early in his presidency. The information was right on, but it was like a guillotine. They took the top guy and chopped his head off and basically said, who's next? Anybody else want to bring up these type of things? And, I've talked to a lot of reporters from major newspapers, and they don't doubt one bit what we've come up with. Well, I mean, there's so much to back it up. But they've told me, look, our newspaper will not publish this. This is off limits. And hopefully, the piece that I'm providing for everyone is how they executed the attack and who executed it. And all these other people that are circling around it, that's why I wrote the book, so they could take that piece and put it in and continue on with it. But definitely, especially the major networks are getting their pipeline of information through a real small tube. And whatever CBS gets, NBC gets, and Fox gets, it's the same story.
That's right.
it's from unofficial sources, and we can't tell you who told us this, but this is, people believe that. They believe that whatever comes over NBC is gospel, and but when we check it, it makes no sense at all. At the end of the book, I cite some examples. One was, they were showing a graphic of a guy that had a bomb in his leg, and they said, our sources tell us that, Al Qaeda has come up with this new way of implanting bombs inside of your leg, and good. I mean, that scares the heck out of everybody.
Oh, yeah, gut bombs, like literal. And I'm not talking about a hot dog either that's gone bad, but they're literally inside their bodies even.
Yeah. So, I mean, what kind of a search would you have to do on somebody to ensure that, everyone in the world who's boarded an airplane doesn't have a bomb in their leg, implanted in their leg? I mean, how much damage would that do anyway?
We can't profile anybody, so we just scrutinize everybody.
Right. So, I hope that this book will hit people in the media and people in the intelligence community who aren't at the very top. It's like the FBI thing. All these field agents, they came up with all this great information, all this great evidence, but when it got to the top, it was like bottle capped in. And it's a bottle cap from the top on this entire 9/11 thing. There's people in the middle that have to know the truth, and people in the media that are a little bit lower down than the producers. I would love to have a trial and see, where they got these tapes from bin Laden. Where exactly did they come from?
Yeah, they just show up in the mail one day. That's a good point. Just quickly going back to this Dan Rather thing when he ripped his britches with everybody. Now, wasn't it shown? Was it contrived, or was it true that the information that he had presented about former President Bush was inaccurate and contrived? In other words, was the information contrived, or was the revelation that the information was contrived? Was that part contrived?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to. The best I could make out of that one was that his source told him that this was the truth, and then when they checked it, when the rest of the media went in there to affirm what he had said, he changed his story.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it made him look like an idiot.
Mm-hmm. You feel like taking a call?
Sure.
Let's take one. It's on Wild One. We got Rick in Hollywood. Come up on the bridge and talk to us, Rick.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, guys. Hey. Listen, first of all, okay, the Bush family was involved in robbing this election in this country. So they got a favor from the Saudi Arabians, to establish their name. Because if you remember, even in Europe and around the world, the Bush family's name was indeed crap, okay? So that was the favor of 9/11. Those buildings had to come down because they were damaged from the basement. They were red tagged. Second of all, if the Saudi Arabians, like you're saying, are behind 9/11, why aren't we bombing them?
That's a good question. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Well, what you think, Captain? Why aren't we bombing them anyway? They're what? I'm just curious. What is it that we owe these guys?
I don't know. I have no idea.
It's okay.
I don't know where that is. I'm not in charge of bombing, but I have no idea. I mean, I think if the truth comes out, and Senator Graham has said that the stuff that they classified in his report would really make it clear. I think that's for for our country to decide how to react to that. All I'm doing is bringing out the evidence that has been published and is available. And it's for someone else to decide. It's for us to decide how do we deal with this, and that's why we have a Congress. But I believe our Congress has been bought and paid for, unfortunately. And that's that's where the problem lies.
All right. Now, to get your book, how is this done? From your website?
Yeah, right now the book just got published on Thursday, actually, the final. So it's available now on our website, which is thebigbamboozle.com, and there's a link where you can buy it through the publisher, which is CreateSpace, which is an Amazon shot. It'll be available on Amazon next week.
Okay.
But right now you can go through your website to our website, and then there's a little process that you have to go through. It takes about a minute to put your information in there, and then you'll get it. But that's the only way it's available today.
Well, I'm not just blowing smoke vertically up your kilt here in front of our, several million of our closest friends. This is a very well-written book. You will enjoy the information. And it's just it's another tool to unravel this thing. What else can people do to bring justice to this travesty? What can they do? I mean, it's 11 years ago in September, and we're not letting this go. There are too many unanswered questions. So what can our audience do?
Well, the first thing is awareness. You have to be aware of what the problem is and where it lies. And if I wrote this book so that people could read it they could read it in 2 hours, or they could read it, they could take a month and look at all the links and all the footnotes and everything, and then go to the website where we're going to, I just finished writing the book. Now we're going to try to push this into the right hands, into Washington, try to get some awareness of, what the problem is, that this bin Laden stuff. Anytime that his name is mentioned, red flags should go up in everyone's head, and start listening really closely to what they're saying. And I promise you'll find that there's nothing verifiable about him being involved. So you have to be aware of what's going on. You have to know who was really behind it. And then we have to push together. And I'm going to dedicate, maybe the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever. I don't know how long it's going to take. But we need to get this into the court system. And that needs to be the one solid message. Get this into the court system. I think the fastest way to do it is to get KSM. He's still alive. He's only 90 miles away from our border. We don't have to bring it to New York. We can bring it to any court in the U.S. and get it under subpoena. And, like people like Occupy Wall Street and Occupy, good for them. I mean, these people are actually doing something. And they need support. They need more people to get behind them and demonstrate and talk to your congressmen and hope that they're not too corrupted. And it's just a steady message. Get this thing into the court system. And I believe that Obama and Holder, I believe that those two guys are still trying to get this into the court system, and they're being opposed by the same people that I suspect, and that's Joseph Lieberman, Lindsey Graham,
McCain,
Peter King, those guys. Those are the ones that we need to just keep a good eye on. Those guys.
All right, let's talk to Mike very quickly in Livermore, California. Mike, if you're there, come on the bridge.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Mr. Marshall, a quick statement. I think the major block for a lot of people that can't get behind any of these things with 9/11 is they just don't see the big picture. And the big picture is it all points to the Council on Foreign Relations and the tentacles they have out there and the control they have out there. And there's an excellent DVD documentary called True Lies by Servando Gonzalez, a Cuban patriot who came over in the early 60s. It really goes through the whole history of this CFR. And I was just wondering if you have looked into any connections with the people that were involved in this, as you see, the ones in the military and in the administration and everything else. How many of them are members of the Council on Foreign Relations?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know the answer to that. I have read some of their stuff, but it's interesting that you bring up the Cuban thing, because a lot of this intelligence community, special activities, and all this stuff, it all generated, it all began around the Cuban crisis, the Cuban Revolution, and all that is a lot of offspring from that. Steve Pesesnik is one of those guys. The guy that I worked with, Barry Seal, was one of those guys. Lee Harvey Oswald, that whole group that, a lot of shady stuff going on that started in the 60s with the Cubans and with that foreign council. Yeah, there's, that, and again, that's another thing that can be brought up in court, in the courts, where, we can talk about this forever, but until you get it in court and you get people that can testify under oath, that's where we're going to get the answers, and that's how we're going to get to the end of this thing.
Very good. Let's have one more. Joe in Boston on Wild 5. Come on the bridge, Joe, if you're still there.
Thank you for being so kind as to take my call. Mr. Marshall, I have a couple questions, quick comment. We better get out of this inverted flight. We'll reach surface ceiling. My brother flies for an airline. You're so correct about the yoke. Also, why couldn't people get in that cockpit? And the military did not scramble. And and we should hear those tapes. And the same thing's going to happen here. What happened to Kennedy? And like Egypt Air. Egypt Air went down, and they shut the engine off and put the airplane in a dive. And I'll take my answers off the air. And when this happens, sometimes you can't pull out. But thank you for being so kind, John, just to take my call. And is your book in audio for the blind? That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we're working on the audio version. It should be coming out pretty soon. The cockpit, they've reinforced the cockpit doors. They've put a completely different system in there. It's reinforced. You can't get in there, which could be a good or a bad thing. I don't know. But before 9/11, we had a door that had a key to it, and I go into that in the book where there was a universal key that was available in all Boeing airplanes. It's really incredible. I wrote a whole chapter on that. But, it would take a long time to kick that door down, even with the old system. Today, you could not get into it. The Egypt Air thing, that was a really interesting thing, but it sounds to me like that was a suicide. Like the co-pilot, I believe he was a long-time co-pilot, never checked out his captain, and I think he was having a bad day, and everybody behind him had a worse day.
Philip Marshall, thank you very much. I'll stay in touch with you. For Art Bell, who started it all, George Norrie, Lisa Lyon, good grief, George Nappy, and Punter will be on tomorrow night, and myself, John B. Wells. Remember, it's harder to rebuild than it is to build, and it was tough enough to build this thing in the first place, our country. Ben Franklin was asked, "What have you given us?" His response was, "A republic, if you can keep it." Until next Saturday night, be well.
There was so much traffic out there in the middle of the desert. The 757s and 767s were parked there. We have pictures of them. That's on our, I think that's on our Facebook. We have a bunch of videos on the Facebook that I think are really good. The Big Bamboozle is the page on that. So, there's no question, and there's quite a good history. If you go online, you can see. If you Google it, you can see. Look up the Pinal, Pinal Air Park. That's it's well known as a long-time CIA operated airport. There's a lot of controversy about trying to shut it down years ago. People that are on the board of directors are CIA people. So it has a long connection all the way back to, like I said, Air America.
All right, then. This is such a convoluted deal, isn't it? It's just so ridiculous. So let me just fire the proverbial shotgun out the back door. Why was this done? Who financed it? And who's the king rat who orchestrated all of this? I never thought it was a very good idea to have the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency become president. And it appears that the intelligence community is morphing into one great big American-style KGB. But that's just me, and probably a few million other people. So, you think Bush and Cheney were involved in this up to their necks?
They're cannibalized if they're there for a while in the lucrative parts market, but they're still airworthy airplanes that are ready to go. They're just in between leases. So I took a little trip out there, and I can tell you they got some big rattlesnakes.
Oh, yeah.
On the south end of that airport. But at any rate, I did a little investigating of my own out there, and I looked around. One day I went out there, and I saw that there was 5 747s. This is a county-owned airport, and they wouldn't let me on the airport. They had Evergreen International is one of the famous spook contractors, but they were holding. They wouldn't let me pass the guard gate. And, I just act like I was an aviation enthusiast, just wanted to take pictures or whatever. So I talked to a couple of people around the airport that live around the airport, and they were telling me, that many times people are trying to take pictures of that airport, and, they'll send a car out there and confiscate the camera and all kinds of, bad activities like that. But when I was out there, what I saw was, like I said, this was in about 06, 07, and there was 747s cargo that were being loaded up, and I have no idea where they were going. There was all types of Black Hawk helicopters flying around. It looked like LaGuardia Airport. So there was teleconferences going on, between Boston and New York, FAA headquarters. They were well aware that this airplane had been hijacked. And on top of that, Muhammad Atta, who was flying American 11, thought he was talking to the passengers at one point. And he was actually talking to ATC, which Air Traffic Control, and everything's recorded.
Right.
And he basically said, everybody don't make any stupid moves and things like that.
Right.
So the controllers that were working that flight knew right away that this thing was a hijack, and they started calling people left and right. So when I put it together, when I put the times together, when all these calls were made, Condoleezza Rice, who's Steve Pesesnik, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a real interesting insider with the State Department. He said that it was a false flag operation, that Condoleezza Rice was part of it. So what I kind of concur with, I do concur with that, because when she had a telephone conversation with Bush at 8:55 after the American 11 had hit the North Tower. And in that conversation, she was talking to him and said, all we know is that it was a twin-engine airplane.
And I'll go out on the clothesline first, Philip, and I'll just tell you that I thought it was odd. I can tell you that if I were president of the United States and I got a message that something just hit the fan so hard that it busted off all the blades and stripped the spindle out of the fan motor, I'd have said, children, I have to go. I have to go back to work. A little something's come up, and I need to go, but we'll get back to the pet goat. I'll come back and see you, but I need to go right now. And I'd have been out the door. But again, that's just me. And as his presidency went on, I can't believe somebody just said, we're coming up on an election year, and all you're doing is bashing Bush. You left-wing moron. It's like that's the first time I've ever been accused of being a leftist. But anyway, Hey, I'm glad that it's good if you're going to get anything thrown at you. It's good to get it from both sides. You know what I mean? That way, you know you're going straight down the middle. But I thought his behavior became increasingly more odd. I found that as time went on, he was less articulate. The answers were more convoluted, and the facts became more obscured. So there, I've said my piece. You say yours.
Well, when we put the timing on the attack together, and we see who knew what and when they knew it, basically the FAA knew about 35 minutes before the airplane hit the North Tower. American 11 came out of Boston. The FAA was following these guys. You know, all of a sudden the transponder went off, and you know, this thing makes a beeline towards Manhattan that crashed into the North Tower. Now, the only way she would have known that, and technically that's true, but if you say, oh, it's a twin-engine airplane, you're thinking, you know, a smaller, lighter plane type thing. 767 is a twin-engine airplane, but it weighs 300,000 pounds.
Yeah.
So for her to know that it was a twin-engine airplane, the only way she would have known that was because the FAA told her that, unless she had a eyewitness that just happened to be in, you know, downtown Manhattan and say, oh, you look like a twin-engine airplane to me. It makes no sense. So she told him. She tested. Finally, they got her They got her to testify in 2004. Of course, you know, the media had already convicted, you know, the ghost. And but at any rate, if you think about it, the only way she would have known it was a twin-engine airplane was from the FAA, and the only reason they were talking about that airplane was because they knew it was a hijack. So again, there's a just pants down type thing. You know, there's no way she could have known that. So for him to sit, and that's before he went into the classroom. Now, he sat there until 9:02, you know, fidgeting, looking around, and, you know, he looked like a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, you know.
Yes, he did.
And, you know, and then when the second one hit, I think what he needed to hear was that the attack was complete, and all he heard was that two